Chapter 28. The Sleeping Tiger. Although the FBI now had a substantial amount of evidence against Hansen, in order to arrest him and be sure of a conviction, it was essential to catch him in an act of espionage. To do so would require that he be placed under surveillance. It would have been a great deal easier to do if Hansen worked at headquarters, but for the past 5.5 years, he had been assigned to the State Department as the FBI's senior representative to the Office of Foreign Missions. The office was in charge of relations with the foreign embassies in Washington, as well as consulates and UN missions. It was created by law in 1982 after the controversy over the hilltop location of the Soviet embassy in Washington and the bugging of the American embassy in Moscow. The lawmakers felt it was time to have a watchdog over the foreign embassies, and especially the Soviets. It was no accident that the first head of OFM, with the rank of ambassador, was James E. Nolan, Jr., who had been chief of the Soviet section of the FBI and then moved up to the No. 2 counterintelligence position in the Bureau. At the time, Soviet diplomats were required to book all travel through OFM. If the Russians needed repairs at the embassy, they were required to call OFM. This, of course, opened up all sorts of interesting possibilities for U.S. intelligence agencies. The plumber or electrician sent to the embassy might work for the CIA. After the Soviet Union collapsed, many of these restrictions were removed. Russian diplomats no longer had to book travel or hire repair people through OFM. But Russian diplomats in the embassy, consulates, or at the UN missions were still required to notify OFM to travel more than 25 miles from where they were stationed, and might in some cases have to get prior approval. The same or similar travel restrictions were imposed on diplomats from China and on the UN representatives of Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. All embassies in the U.S. were also required to notify OFM for review of any planned renovations. In May of 1995, Robert Hansen was dispatched to the State Department as the FBI's senior representative to the Office of Foreign Missions. He moved into room 2510C on the second floor of the main State Department building. Hansen, ironically, was also head of an interagency counterintelligence group in OFM. He also served as the FBI liaison to the State Department's Office of Intelligence and Research. In December 2000, soon after Mr. Pym provided the secret file that led to the identification of Hansen as the mole, the FBI placed him under surveillance. It had to be done cautiously, since he was, after all, a trained counterintelligence agent, and might detect any watchers. But the surveillance was done by the Gs, the FBI's Special Surveillance Group, and they were good at their jobs. They dressed like ordinary civilians, workmen repairing a street, for example, to avoid attracting attention. It remained cumbersome, however, to watch Hansen at the State Department. The problem was how to lure him back to FBI headquarters without arousing his suspicions. Hansen's strong interest in computers provided the answer. He prided himself on his computer skills, which were considerable, and the counterspies decided to exploit that fact and offer him a promotion and a job in computers. Mike Wagspack called Hansen into headquarters in December. Hansen seemed extremely tense at their meeting. Wagspack thought he knew the reason. Hansen may have feared his espionage had finally been detected. But when Wagspack, a high-level counterintelligence official, offered Hansen a cushy job in the senior executive service at higher pay, he visibly relaxed. The service is the elite core of the federal government. Hansen's new responsibility, Wagspack explained, would be to ensure that new computer programs developed by the Bureau would be secure. A few days later, Hansen met with Gallagher, the division chief, for the final job interview. I asked him to take the special assignment, Gallagher said. It promoted him into SES. It recognized him for his computer expertise. We were playing on his ego. Hansen was delighted. It was about time the Bureau, even belatedly, was recognizing his brilliance. The senior levels of the Intelligence Division were finally taking notice. He would be back at headquarters after his long exile at State, with a coveted parking spot in the FBI garage. In the meantime, he could not neglect his spying for Moscow. On December 12th, he was seen driving 4 times past Foxstone Park, the site of Dead Drop Ellis. It was a significant moment. For the first time, the Bureau now had evidence that Hansen was an active spy. It is much harder to prove the case against a spy who has gone to ground. Now there was a chance that Hansen could be caught in the act. To that end, the FBI, with approval of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, tapped Hansen's home and office telephones and searched his car. Before Hansen moved into his new FBI office on the 9th floor, technicians installed a tiny concealed video camera. The images were relayed by closed-circuit television to the Washington field office, where they were constantly monitored. The FBI could not gain access to Hansen's house to search it or plant bugs because his wife or children were always there. But the FBI found another way to keep the Hansen residence under surveillance. A house across the street was put up for sale in December. The owners were delighted when a woman calling herself Ann Manning paid $362,500 all cash on December 22nd, only 12 days after the house went on the market. Ms. Manning did not seem to care about the loose bathroom tiles or other problems that buyers complain about. One neighbor was curious when a telephone lineman said he had installed 8 lines for the new owner. Apparently, Ms. Manning really liked to talk on the phone a lot. On Christmas Eve, Wagspack encountered Hansen at midnight mass at St. Andrew's Church in Clifton, Virginia. They wished each other a Merry Christmas. Wagspack thought to himself, "I hope you have a joyous Christmas, because this will probably be your last one." The day after Christmas, Hansen cruised by Foxstone Park again 3 times, looking for a taped signal. Late in the afternoon, he stopped his car for several seconds, studying the park sign, then drove off. Just before 9 p.m., he parked his car near the park entrance, walked over to the signal site, and swept the beam of his flashlight up and down the wooden posts near the sign. He must have found nothing, because he turned and walked away, raising his arms in exasperation. It was time for Hansen to wrap up his work at the State Department and get ready to move to his new position at headquarters. On January 12th, Tom Burns, his boss at the Office of Foreign Missions and a former FBI colleague, presided over a going-away party for Hansen at the China Garden restaurant in Arlington, Virginia. 15 to 20 colleagues turned out to wish Hansen well. As his superior, I made the usual perfunctory remarks. Burns said, "We'll miss you, and don't be a stranger." Only later did he realize the irony of his words. When a colleague left, he would traditionally be given a unique souvenir. Usually we would give a diplomatic license plate with his name on it, mounted on wood, Burns explained. The Office of Foreign Missions controlled the distinctive red, white, and blue license plates issued to foreign diplomats, a familiar sight in the capital. But the plate was not ready, so Hansen did not receive the souvenir license plate with the name Bob in big letters. On January 15, 2001, Hansen reported in to room 9930 at FBI headquarters in his new job. The days of sharing cramped cubicles were behind him. "We gave him a nice office," Gallagher said. Before long, however, Hansen began to be suspicious about his sudden good fortune. Several times that month, he searched the FBI database looking for his name and other signs that he might be under investigation. But the counterspies had made sure there was nothing there to be found. On January 30th, the FBI secretly searched Hansen's Taurus. In the glove compartment, they found a roll of white adhesive tape, of the kind he used to signal the KGB. In the trunk, they found several dark-colored garbage bags, similar to the one that Mr. Pym had provided in Moscow with Hansen's fingerprints. In the trunk, the agents also discovered a box containing classified documents. Several were about then-current FBI counterintelligence investigations and were classified secret. For all of the elaborate precautions that Hansen took to protect his identity from the Russians, he was remarkably careless in guarding his own treachery. In early February, FBI agents searched Hansen's office at headquarters. They were elated to find several communications to and from the SVR on a computer flash drive. By early February, Hansen had become convinced that his transfer to headquarters and sudden elevation to a higher status within the Bureau were suspect. He was very enthusiastic for the new assignment, at least at first, Gallagher recalled, but he began to realize he didn't have a meaningful job. We didn't want him to have access to any classified or sensitive information. We gave him things to do, a lot of make work. By now, Hansen realized that his career as a Russian spy was unraveling rapidly. He composed what was to be his last message to Moscow. It read in part, "Dear friends, I thank you for your assistance these many years. It seems, however, that my greatest utility to you has come to an end, and it is time to seclude myself from active service. Since communicating last, I have been promoted to a higher, do-nothing senior executive job outside of regular access to information within the counterintelligence program. I strongly suspect you should have concerns for the integrity of your compartment concerning knowledge of my efforts on your behalf. Something has aroused the sleeping tiger. Perhaps you know better than I. Life is full of its ups and downs. My hope is that you will have provided some sufficient means of recontact. If not, I will be in contact next year, same time, same place. Perhaps circumstances then will have improved. Your friend, Ramon Garcia." Despite his warning that something has aroused the sleeping tiger, and that therefore he was in great danger, Hansen could not quite bring himself to bid a final goodbye to his friends. He needed them too much, so he promised to be back in touch next year, same time. But the tiger was no longer sleeping. Robert Hansen had run out of time.